Jason, as it is each and every week, the Lee Summit Town Hall podcast is brought to the good people by Budget Blinds of Lee Summit.
Budget Blinds!
It is still October, and October is safety month in the window treatment world.
And you know what that means, Nick. All hail our robot shade overlords.
All hail!
So just keep that in mind. All right, so automated shades, it's a fancy thing. You can get a safer environment for your pets and your kids. You can save on money by having your programmable. Not only are they automated, they're programmable, so you can operate them from your phone or program them to go up and down, so you can save heating and cooling costs and only use them up or down when you need them to give you the best energy efficiency for your home. It makes life better.
So make everyday life just a little bit easier, safer, and more secure. Go visit our friends at Budget Blinds right in the heart of Lee Summit in downtown. Tell them Jason and Nick sent you. Hello and welcome to this Friday conversation edition of the Lee Summit Town Hall podcast. I am Nick Parker from Link to Lee Summit, and with me today is one of my new friends, Bill Keith. Bill, welcome to the show. Or, wake up, Bill. It's time for a show.
Sorry about that, Nick.
Well,
thank you for having me.
I know I've been called boring a little bit before, but we try not to be. Bill, I have just gotten to know you in the past 2 or 3 months. You are a fellow BridgeSpace member. You operate your business Money Mailer out of here. I have been curious as we've got to know each other because sales and marketing is not your background.
No.
You are a pharmacist, a scientist by trade. So I'm curious, why the heck would you go from being a science nerd to a guy that makes sales calls?
Well, what got me started in science was my career before I was a pharmacist.
Uh-oh. He came with props, guys.
Yeah.
It's not going to fit.
Sure it is.
It's not going to fit.
Sure it is. Child of the 60s, born in 1962, right?
Yeah, that's not going to work
so well when you got that down. But yeah, astronaut first, pharmacist second, and now with Money Mailer.
Well, I'm gonna say the astronaut part is probably all about being a kid of the 60s,
It
right?
is. Born in 1962, and you can't imagine how big that moon landing was if you weren't there to see it. I was, in July of 1969, I would have been 6 years old. Yeah. What is going on with this headphone?
Well, okay, I'm an old newspaper guy.
Yeah.
And I collect old front pages and newspapers. So I have 2 different I'm going to stop it. Because I'm going to go to the wide shot here, and we're going to put this on YouTube for everybody to see you.
That's good.
Now flip it. Nope, you had it. Now flip the ear.
Oh,
there you go.
There we go.
There you go.
You see, I'm spatially, for a guy that used to be in space, I'm spatially challenged sometimes. Yeah.
So I collect.
Not an engineer.
Right. I collect newspapers. So I have 2 different front pages from the moon landing, and they're a part of my prized possessions in my collection of big front pages. I also, because I know where you're from, I'm going to tell you, I also have the front of the Kansas City Times from October of 1985.
I didn't know there was a Kansas City Times.
It used to, yes, yeah. It used to be 2 papers.
Oh.
There was the Times and the Star, and they merged I believe it was the late 80s when they merged the 2 editions.
Yeah.
So it was a morning edition and an afternoon edition.
I used to throw newspapers as a kid, and there was the Globe Democrat, which came out in the morning, and so I'd get up at 5 in the morning or so, or 4. And go out throwing papers, so it's there for people at 6 in the morning. And then the afternoon edition was the Post-Dispatch, and then they merged,
right,
and the Globe shut down. Yeah.
So if you ever want to be reminded of the glorious fall of 1985, when my Royals defeated your St. Louis Cardinals.
End of interview. That moon landing paper. I don't know if the Royals one is down there, but the moon landing paper is also in the restaurant at one of my advertisers, a neighborhood cafe.
It is.
If you've never been in there, it is. I think it's a historic place, isn't it? National Historic Place. If it's not, it should be.
Yeah, it should be. And I'm going to tell you, and I'm hoping that the owner, Tony Olson, is listening.
Yes.
I was an editor at the Lee Summit Journal for a very long time, and it still pains me that none of my front pages are on that wall.
Well, that says more about you than it does Tony.
Well, I don't know. I think Tony can fix that for me, and I had some good ones. And here this show's really gonna be about you today, but I'm gonna make it about me for just one more minute.
Sure.
One of my proudest days as a journalist was here at the Journal. I designed the front page on September 11th, 2001.
Oh my!
And so, I mean, if any of them, come on, that should be up there.
That should be.
That was
not kidding.
That is. It was a horrible day in our nation, but one of my proudest days in the business to have helped tell that story and tell the story of how we reacted in this community on that day.
Yeah, because it was a global event, but the globe is made up of local communities.
Yeah,
so that's very important, I think.
Yeah. So it started off with me wanting to tease Tony, and now we got serious.
Yeah. I even got a little emotional there for a second.
I really do kind of. I've enjoyed getting to know you, but I've wanted to pick your brain a little bit about this because you have a long career as a pharmacist, and some of the things I've learned, you've some interesting things. You worked with the U.S. Olympic Committee as a pharmacist. How do you change careers? Because that is a very right side of the brain to the left side of the brain to go from working in pharmaceuticals to being a marketing specialist. How did that happen?
There was several things. First of all, I'd done it for so long, and because the last 6 years of my working career was spent at home, and I had no gasoline expense, no work wardrobe expense, no eating out expense, and got paid as a pharmacist gets paid. And so I was able to save a lot of money. I made a couple of really lousy investments, so don't get me wrong, but I made many more good ones. And I got started early. And there's several financial planners and advisors in this building here at BridgeSpace, which is a wonderful space, by the way. And
we try not to give Ben Rayo, the owner, compliments during the show. It's kind of a rule, and I realize you're new, so I'm just gonna let it out there. We say one nice thing about BridgeSpace's show. That's it.
I've already complimented him today. In fact, they're having a memorial service here, and then through one of my other businesses that stemmed off of Money Mailer in this new career, I'm producing 2 television shows here at BridgeSpace. So you've got one end of the spectrum being a memorial service, ultra serious, ultra sad, and we've got a costume party, live, film before a live studio audience production of 2 television shows, 1-hour shows. So you've got extreme hilarity and fun on one end, and you've got a memorial service on the other. This building is really diverse, but I found out they don't do weddings. That's not allowed.
That's true. Yeah. Well, how did you make that transition? Because it's a big transition.
It wasn't just finances. It was I had done it for so long, and I didn't want to die as Bill the pharmacist. And so I decided, okay, let's do something that is fun. I've now got the assets, but the real trigger point, and it was an absolute trigger, and it turned out, at first I thought it was the worst thing to ever happen to me, and it turned out to be the best thing, and that's that I was diagnosed as bipolar, and I went full manic for the first time ever on my birthday in 2016, so I was 54 years old, and it was a family disagreement, and I went ballistic. And I was in full mania for 3 full weeks. Probably that's a 10. That's 10 on a 10 scale. 0's being institutionalized or having the gun pointed at your temple. And I went there too, eventually. But at the 10 level, I was there for 3 weeks for sure, and then more of at a 9 level, I was probably there for 3 months. And over that 3 weeks, I slept an average of an hour a night.
Was this a new thing in your life that developed later? Is this something? And I'm gonna pause really quickly because we didn't plan on going this way. But
no, right.
But one thing I've learned doing this show over the last few years is I've met people that talk about and are experts in mental health, and that it is important that we have these conversations and that we put it out there, that we have to talk about it and we have to remove the stigmas. So while I have no expertise, I do have questions. Is this a new thing? Was this something you kind of had dealt with?
Yes and no. I had gotten diagnosed with depression, which was a misdiagnosis and a bad misdiagnosis in 1994. And I went into an internist for a sprained ankle or something. It was a physical thing. And I'm a pharmacist, and I was working in poison control at the time. And so I knew this physician that was there at the hospital where we were based. And I went into him and said, I've got all these symptoms. It was a Zoloft ad. And I said, I've got all these symptoms. Well, I did. I didn't know I had all the other ones too that went on the other pole. So it used to be called manic depression, and they got away from that because that was stigmatizing. So now it's bipolar. It's the same thing. But
words matter.
I wear it.
How we describe it matters.
It does. And I remember what goes around comes around, because I remember, and I was a college student, and I went to UMKC Pharmacy School, and a buddy of mine went over for the Dodgers and Cardinals, and that was the season of 1985. And John Tudor was really, really hot. He just pitched great, and he was going up against Valenzuela or Hershiser or somebody. And so it was a big-time pitching matchup on a weekend.
I think that was Valenzuela.
Yeah, it was 1985, and it was the 4th of July, and wisdom teeth were coming in. Impacted wisdom teeth were coming in. I was just miserable. But I do remember that day very, very closely, because the VP Fair, the Veiled Prophet Fair, and maybe that's still going on, but it's a big, big deal. There's 1 million people that go to that thing. So like you saw in 2015, when the Royals won it down at Union Station, that happened every 4th of July, that size of crowd, and bigger, maybe even twice as big. I don't know how many people were down there. But it's a huge fireworks celebration, and there's all these tents and festivals and things, and one of them was the St. Louis Manic Depressive Society. And we're college kids, and we're not, we weren't sensitive to anything back then. And we were drinking beer, and we were thinking, well, that's funny. And I remember taking a picture of that. Well, I had it. I had it then. I didn't know it. So you ask, is it a new thing or an old thing? Well, it's an old thing, but it manifested itself as full mania in 2016 on my 54th birthday. And the reason why it manifested that late was I was put on the wrong medication, and I was misprescribed. The reason I went to an internist and he prescribed me, that was when HMOs had started. And he was the gatekeeper. And if he didn't feel confident in the diagnosis, he would say, you need to see a psychiatrist. And then I could have seen a psychiatrist and would have been covered. But if I went to a specialist right away, I'm paying, $1,000 an hour or whatever, and then it may take forever to get in. I mean, those guys there aren't very many of them, and guys and women both. But there aren't very many of them. So that would have been a financial real difficulty for me. So
were you still in the pharmacy business at this point?
I was a student, but I got diagnosed in '94. Yeah, so I was a student when I took the picture, and I found it funny. But yeah, in '94 I was working in poison control at the time, and so he put me on an antidepressant, and so I thought I'd kick depression's butt for 22 years, and I actually I moved over here to Kansas City. After I'd spent some time, that was in St. Louis at Poison Control. And so I moved over here to Kansas City, and the prescription came with me. My medical history came with me. And then the internist that I was seeing kept adding antidepressants because I had anxiety. Well, she gave me an antidepressant for that. And the psychiatrist later told me, well, there's one study that shows this thing works for anxiety. There's 1,000 that say it does not. She focused on the one. And so he said that was a mistake. And then they put me on an antidepressant for sleep. So I was on 3 antidepressants. So basically, I was on 3 stimulants, and I'm bipolar. You don't need to. That's the single worst thing you can do, other than misdiagnosing, is misprescribing and putting people on 3 antidepressants. I was on speed, basically, and here I am. And so that's why I went full manic.
So in 2016 is when you had an episode, and I'm really not even sure how to state this and ask it. So bear with me, and if I'm wrong, correct me.
I will.
I'm always wrong. You have this episode in 2016, and that is when you realized that you need to you need to see somebody?
Absolutely.
Could you do that on your own, or did somebody have to take you? I mean, and like I said, I have no background in this, and I have no frame of reference to even give you real empathy, right?
Right.
So I'm trying to understand what that was like in that moment, because I feel like the way I have seen those episodes described, the way I've heard them described, I feel like it would be very hard to actually have the self-awareness to know I need to get to someone.
Well, that's what it is, and because I'm medically trained, I mean, the first 2 years of pharmacy school when I went to UMKC were with the medical students. So we had half of a medical degree, you might say, and then we spun off from there and went more toward pharmacy, obviously. So in my training, and I worked for Truman Lakewood and some other places that had mental health wards, so I knew about bipolar disorder, but it's really hard. First of all, I'm not a psychiatrist, number one. Number two, I mean, my medical doctor, my internist couldn't tell. So I don't feel bad for not just diagnosing myself.
Right.
I mean, the internist has more training.
Well,
than
you
I
shouldn't
do.
have to. You shouldn't have to have that kind of pressure that you have to diagnose yourself.
Exactly. And here's the problem, Nick. Even as a pharmacist, because I beat myself up, because after I went manic, and he took me off all those depressants. Yeah, well, medications for depression. I swung back to the other pole, and I got suicidal. Now, that was after I was in treatment, so I was able to, contact them, and I called the suicide hotline. It's a cause I really believe in, and this is one of the reasons I'm talking about this. I wear this as a badge of honor because I'm one of the ones that came out the other direction. I'm in a very, very good place in my life, and I'm going to write a book called Connect the Dots, and it shows all the great things that happened to me, just almost on a daily basis, all the bad things that happened to me, but if none of those dots were there, I wouldn't be where I am today, which is a good place. So that's how I'm going to give back and maybe help others.
So before we go on, so we're talking here in a matter of 2 to 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. You've hit both extremes, both polar extremes.
It was about 4 weeks, yeah.
Is
and
that
I got suicidal twice? Yeah.
Is that I don't know if the right word here is that a common way that it manifests itself? Is that, I mean, and I don't want to.
Yes.
I don't want to try to.
No, it's all
put stereotypes in things, and but I'm trying to figure, is that kind of how it happens?
It is, and there's a different. It's different for everybody in certain extents. Some people can go manic, or it's called hypomanic. 5 is the neutral point, so that's neurotypical people. So if you don't have bipolar disorder, you're spending most of your days, and you have mood swings, but they go between 4, a little sad, to 6. Now, sadness and depression are not the same thing. Depression has physical symptoms. I mean, when I got bad and got down to 0, you cannot get out of bed. It's not because there's no desire to get out of bed. You actually feel worse about yourself because it's 3 in the afternoon, you can't get out of bed. But for me anyway, my thighs, each one, felt like it weighed 400 pounds. It took me 4 trips to the restroom before I could brush my teeth. I made it like 2 steps and got weak and just crashed back down on the bed for half an hour. It took me 2 hours and 4 trips to brush my teeth. And it's the 6th leading disability cause in the entire planet. And that's why you either are so depressed you can't show up for work, or you're so manic that you get fired. And I did have it was basically I quit, but I would have been fired had I not quit because I was a fantastic pharmacist. But when you're manic like that, you're a lousy employee. You're hypercritical about everybody, not just your boss, but everybody. And the boss did nothing wrong. We're on great terms now. She says, you ever need a job reference and going back to pharmacy? And I'm like, ugh. If I ever have to go back to pharmacy, I'm not going to be in this good place I am now. But we're on a great relationship now. And at the time, it was terrible. I mean, it's as bad as it could be. And so,
what's that like to be aware of that now? And kind of with that little bit of a hindsight, to be like, I was in this place that made me a horrible, because look, nobody wants to lose a job, right?
Yeah.
So, and that is a horrible, horrible place, and we all want it to be somebody else's fault. And now you're looking back when you're 3-4 years later now,
sooner
and
than that,
and you realize,
yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. Well,
Oh.
that gets back to the question you asked me, did I seek help voluntarily? And I did, but it was sort of voluntarily. I actually had some legal trouble then. It was a municipal ordinance. It wasn't a huge deal. I mean, it's on the level of littering and disturbing the peace, right? It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's not even a misdemeanor. Misdemeanor is a county-based charge, and you go to court. And I chose to go to court to fight this because I just knew I was right. Well, afterwards I was going, you know what? I am wrong because I was guilty in court. And the prosecutor says, well, we want incarceration. Of course, they always push for the maximum.
Right.
I think, and then my client or my attorney says, well, this is his first offense, and he has a pristine record. And, at the time I had a perfect 850 credit score. But the prosecutor called me a narcissist. And back in 1981, when I graduated high school, I was a finalist, one of 100 in the United States for Mr. USA Teen. And that's for community service, academics, and athletics. And that thing doesn't even exist anymore. It was a sort of a beauty pageant kind of thing. We had that's in the era of short shorts too. We had a little dance number. I'm glad that film is not.
Is it now? By the way, I am currently searching Google right now.
But when I looked at myself, and I did this little bit of self-diagnosis because I thought, I wonder if I'm bipolar. And there's 11 symptoms, Nick, and I checked 9 boxes, and I thought back to things in the past. And since that was so recent, it said one of the 11 was gets into legal trouble sometime, for the very first time, loses a job sometime, and that was basically the first time. So I'm looking at all these, and I'm going, I've got 9 of the 11. And there's something wrong with me. There's no reason I should be, somebody that's community service should be seen as a narcissist by anybody. And that still brings me to tears that I was in that kind of condition. And so I thought, I need help. And so I went to Rediscover, and they saved my life.
I have gotten to know some of the people at Rediscover, and I think that is one of the best organizations.
It's fantastic
in our area.
Once I get some money, they're going to get, and when I die, they're going to get a big chunk of whatever I have. Let's put it that way.
So, you are going through all of this, and you come to terms to leave your job.
Yes.
And I'm struck a little bit by you say you now wear this as a badge of honor.
I do.
That you have, is that because of an acknowledgement that you made to yourself? Is that because you've moved past a certain point? Is it a conglomeration of all of those things?
It is an amalgamation of.
That's the word.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yes, and
dang it, I hate it when I get them wrong.
Well, that's all right. That's the science part of me.
Yeah.
I know what.
Well, I usually get the words right. That's kind of I like to have that part.
And I've got 2 dentists in my family, right? So they know all about amalgams.
I'm sorry.
We're proud of them, so that's all that matters, right? I just don't ever want to see them in that capacity.
I always think of Steve Martin from Little Shop of Horrors when I hear dentist. So
I never saw that one. I saw The Jerk, and that's that's kind of where I was even with the depression. Say, this is all I need. I need this lamp, and this roll of toilet paper. It's all I need. So
just don't shoot the oil cans.
I have right. I have very good. I have, and I do have a very strong fondness for movies. And the one thing I always wanted to do was screenwrite. And I've got some great screenwriting ideas. So I've always had that side of the brain, the creative brain. And bipolar disorder people, by and large, are extremely creative. Just because you're creative doesn't mean you're bipolar. Just because you're bipolar doesn't mean you're creative, but the tendency is there. I mean, I dream in color. That's supposedly rare, but I've never dreamed any other way. And I always thought, well, that's strange that most people apparently dream in black and white.
Never heard that.
But I dream in color. What color do you dream in?
I think it's color.
Yeah.
I mean, they always seem real to me.
Mine's vivid color. Right?
I've never heard of that. I've never heard that where that it's common for people to dream in black and white.
I mean, a psychiatrist out there. We're not doing this live, but they'd be calling in right now saying, "Well, Bill, you're off your rocker." I don't know.
There's a reason I don't do this live because I step out on that edge a lot and ask these questions and I like I said, look, I'm not an expert, but I'm curious. And
exactly.
So that's why I kind of want to do these, and I feel like even though we didn't plan to go down this road and talk about this topic, I feel like
we didn't plan any topics.
from what I've learned,
yeah,
is we just have to talk about it. And if we just put these things out there, it can help remove those stigmas. And so I want to go back to kind of your process of where you were as you decided you need help. You went and got help.
Yes. As a pharmacist, I felt humiliated that I didn't see this. And then I was like, you know what? This is your depressed brain talking, because it's people shouldn't have to diagnose themselves at first. And I knew I was bipolar. I just saw all those symptoms, and I thought back in my life, and I was like, yep, that explains this and that. One of the big signs, it's really more signs than symptoms. One of them is inability to keep a relationship. And I'm a heterosexual. I've always been. A buddy of mine likes to say I'm a flaming heterosexual. And so I kind of like that term. But my family has always wondered. I've never been married and never been in a long-term relationship. And they're like, is he gay? In fact, I'm doing these two film productions here at BridgeSpace on the 30th. And I'm trying to bring family and friends, because we want a lot of friendly faces in the crowd. And there's 120 seats, and we're trying to stack every seat with people that we know. So I invited my extended family from my dad's side, and just called one of my cousins, who's kind of the linchpin or the gatekeeper for the entire family, and said, call me back. I've got some really exciting good news. It all came kind of sudden, but I want you all here. It's my big day. It's my equivalent to a wedding day. So she calls me back the next day, and I said, are you even the slightest bit curious? And she said, sort of. I think I got it figured out. Well, of course, now I've got to ask her, right? And she says, you're moving in with a man. I said, no, not there's anything wrong with that. Go back to Seinfeld. But I said, no, that's not it at all. And then I told her about this. But that long-term relationships is a problem for bipolar people, and here's why. You're either depressed or you're manic.
Right.
You're very, very seldom in the middle.
And sometimes I wonder if those questions and those kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge questions about gender and sexuality are really because we're trying to avoid the real discussion, which is you have a mental health issue to deal with, and so are we coming up with these other things
because we're more comfortable talking about
it's much easier for us to talk behind your back, or to wonder, maybe it's just because he's gay.
Yeah.
And instead of let's actually confront that there's a real issue.
Right.
Right, because gay's not an issue.
No, we've gotten past that.
Right.
And that's,
it took us way too long, but as a society, we're finally getting past that a little bit. Not totally.
Not in Missouri. Legally, not in Missouri.
But instead of having the real conversation, which is that for your life, you've struggled. And you may not have even known you were struggling the whole time.
Nick, I lived 22 years under the illusion of wellness. Those are 22 years I'll never get back. And most people are diagnosed at the age of 18, sometimes even as early as 16. I had it when I was 18. I look back now, because that was my first year of college, is that I had it then. And I went to law school, one of the best law schools in the world, one of the most expensive law schools in the world. I left because I was studying and this part's true, I was studying for the boards for pharmacy school in the first year of law school, that's way too much. I took on way too much.
Why?
Grandiosity. That's a sign of bipolar disorder.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so this is one of the best law schools in the world telling me if you're not in a relationship, don't get in one. If you do not work, your law school first year is a full-time job, especially at Washington University in St. Louis. And tuition there now is probably $75,000 a year. When I went there in 1985, it was $8,800 either a semester or a year. I don't remember exactly. But I was distracted. That's another sign of bipolar disorder. I had grandiosity, another big sign. There's about 11 of them, like I said. And grandiosity is, they told me I'd be academically challenged in pharmacy school. I got out with almost a 4.0. Not quite, almost. And I thought, they always say that. Well, law school's different. Law school, I mean, in a lot of ways, but
I have always been told law school is about weeding people out.
It is.
That first year.
It is. And I weeded myself out, really, because I thought, the meter's running. I'm not so sure I want to do this. It was a really bad economy then. Reagan's, it had gotten better, but there were way too many attorneys. There were too many ambulance chasers. And I was like, I really don't want to do that. I had the aptitude, Nick. one of the first professors said, some of you will make excellent judges. I'm a pretty fair person. I think I would have been an excellent judge. But A, I was too distracted. Check that box for bipolar disorder. B, I was too grandiose. I can do this. I'm Superman. By the way, the Cardinals and Royals were playing. So my college, I watched, I don't know, probably 10 games a year, if not more, when I was in college for the 4 years I was there. Back then it was a 4-year degree. We did 5 academic years and 4. And so I thought, well, there were trimesters basically where I'm taking 20 hours of classes, essentially because it was compressed into a shorter period of time. So it was called 16 hours, but we were in class a lot for that last couple of years. We had no breaks. So I thought I was Superman. I could do everything. Check that box. So there's about 11 symptoms, and I look back at the times, and I was like, you know what? All those things were true. Yes, I was studying for boards, and yes, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it. And yes, the Cardinals and Royals were in the World Series about the time I made the decision to get out of it. But the real reason was I had bipolar disorder. And that the one real regret in my life is I don't know that I would have been a lawyer or a judge, but I would have liked the education. And I was there long enough to learn how lawyers think. I mean, I did pick that up. So I did get that skill for I think I paid $2,200 as it turned out because I got out pretty early. So
I kind of like that. It was a little bit long description of how you feel now that you're able to look back at these things. Yes. and your perspective now as you do it. And so here's the thing. So all of a sudden then you decide, well, I'm not going to go back to pharmaceuticals. I'm not going into that. And you shift into, I'm going to go meet people. I'm going to walk into 25 businesses a day, maybe 40 businesses a day, and have conversations with people and then try to convince them that I'm the one that can help them get better.
Up until I was 8.
And so that's a big switch.
Yes. And it's been an enlightening switch, and that's why I love talking about this now. I get emotional about it. I've gotten emotional about it here a little bit. But it's enlightening for me, and that's how I can help people, is people that are on that really, really super depressed pole, help them see the light at the end of the tunnel, and don't pull that trigger. Don't take that overdose. Call somebody, get the help. It will get better. It can't get worse, and that's the problem when you get suicidal. Every minute of every day or every minute of every hour of every day is worse than the one before it, and you get to the point where you just can't stand it anymore. But Rediscover saved my life, so I'm very proud of it. I do get emotional about it, but I'm very proud of it.
Well, I think that is something to be proud of, and I think that is a fantastic way, I think, to do one small part of removing some stigmas, so that someone else can talk about it, and somebody else can maybe have their own self-awareness to say, I need to make a phone call. Or even, and I've heard this too as I've had some of these conversations around the community, even for somebody who's on the outside and can see their friend is struggling, and that it's okay to make that call for their friend.
Yeah.
And that it's okay to say, hey, my friend, you can talk to me.
I got to the point, Nick, where I was on with the suicide helpline and the crisis line, and they're very good. If you're at that point, call them. They're very good. They will walk you off the ledge. And so right now I'm really focusing on the benefits of this. I've got a very self-deprecating wit, and I tell people that, and I say, look at me. I've got a lot of material to work with. Right? I'm bald. I'm a little bit overweight. I used to be a lot overweight. Got a gray beard, so yeah, I can pull out jokes about myself all day and night. So I've never had a stigma really about anything. I'm comfortable in my own skin.
Has that changed over the last 3 to 5 years as you've gone through this transformation?
Oh yes. I thought when I went full manic, it was an issue with my brother, and I thought it was the worst thing to ever happen to me. Now it's the best. I mean, I look back at it and I go, if I hadn't gone full manic, if I hadn't had this little bit of legal trouble, if I hadn't checked myself into Rediscover, I'd still be in that place, under the illusion of wellness and be losing time. Now I feel like I've got a new birth, and it's all about promise.
I really like the analogy that you're creating, that you have gotten past an illusion of wellness.
Yes,
I like that, and I think that's something that probably all of us at some point have to see past.
Yeah.
And realize that there are some things we've got to deal with, and there are things that create make us who we are.
Yeah, the tears, by the way, that I'm shedding now are not tears of sadness. It's of joy, really, because I think about how far I've come.
That's fantastic, and I really am in awe a little bit that we've gone here today, and that you're talking about this, and that you've been through these things.
Yeah.
And you realize that it was something that you had your whole life that was shaping who you are, and now you can say, I've recognized it. I'm moving on. It's a process, and you're proud of what it is.
And because I've always wanted to write screenplays, and I've got a file, Nick, of 30 or 40 ones that I think that are really good. Some are very funny, sort of streams of consciousness, like a Mel Brooks type of thing, or a Monty Python, Animal House, that kind of stuff, all the way up to history. Dred Scott's one of my favorite topics. He really changed everything. That case, Dred Scott versus I forget, Ferguson or somebody, I remember who it was, but it was a case where he was he was a slave in Missouri but went north to Wisconsin, and that was the case that really brought on the Civil War, that ended slavery, that brought in bleeding Kansas, and I really love that topic too. I think that needs to be explored more in film, because people aren't aware the Civil War started right here.
I just
10 years or 8 years before it started officially at Fort Sumter.
I just this summer visited the Civil Rights Museum in Memphis for the first time, and it was an incredible experience. That is a national treasure. I tell everyone, you have to get there. Find the time, find the way, and get there. My wife and I went. It took us about 4.5 hours. It could have taken longer. The very last part of it, we actually left quickly because we simply could not take in anymore.
Right, you need probably 2 or 3 days.
We hit a point where mentally, emotionally, I could not take more information.
Yeah,
I just couldn't do it. And then we spent 2 hours trying to find a way to talk about it and struggling. I mean, just because it was
that's great,
so emotional, so much information, and you think when you go there that it's because it's at the Lorraine Hotel, right?
Yeah, I was just going to ask you.
You think that it's mostly going to be about Martin Luther King, which you could spend an entire day learning about his story, but it's not. It is our nation's history from the context of civil rights. Of the history from slavery on, and you learn so much. And honestly, we each had different points where we kind of were like, okay, I'm not going to go much longer.
Right.
For me, there is kind of a recreation of the Selma Bridge.
Yes.
And it's about probably, I'm going to say maybe like a quarter of the bridge that's recreated, and so you're walking the bridge as you're seeing all these displays.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah.
By the way.
And at that point, I was when I really paused, and I had to will myself to keep taking more information in, because it really is kind of an emotional experience. And honestly, I'm going to tell you this too. Even our community has had some hard conversations here in Lee Summit about race and about diversity in the last
recently,
in the last 18 months. It was interesting to me as we walked through, and you're basically doing a timeline, right? You're walking through a timeline to see some of the language that has been used over the course of our country, and to realize that some of that language is still being used today.
Is that language in the museum?
As reasons not to have the conversation, or reasons to justify actions. And so it was interesting to me, and I actually snapped a few pictures of some of those displays on my phone, because I was like, I just heard somebody use this exact same phrase. These same words were being used. It was an incredible experience, and I will tell you that for 4.5 hours, the two of us might have said 10 words to each other. It was mostly silence.
What I feel sensitive about in particular is the way we treated the Native Americans, we as white people. And I say I'm actually some of both. And a lot of us in this area have some, so that's a particular issue. And I'd like to listen to history books at night on Audible. And that's basically I fall asleep to them, and then the next night I back it up to where I last remembered I was. So that way, a 40-hour book takes me about 6 months to listen to, right? And so I do recommend Audible if you've never listened to it. It's $15 a month, and you get one free book, and I never have to buy any. Really, it's fantastic. But so I listened to a lot of that about the Trail of Tears and some of the ways. I mean, the Lakotas we treated so badly. We put them in the Badlands, basically, areas that it's a starvation camp.
If you visit the Dakotas and the Mount Rushmore areas, there's a lot of great history about the relationships between our expansion and the Lakota tribes.
And the book I'm listening to now, it's about the Gilded Age, and it's a lot of that had to do with the Indian Wars. They were called Indian Wars back then, and so a lot of those tribes up north fled into Canada. Canada said basically it was an issue of Canada's like, we don't have the resources to to take care of you folks. You have to go back to the United States. So they blocked entry from Canada into the United States, and the United States said we don't want them either. So it was kind of almost like the Syrian refugee issue a few years ago, and maybe that's still going on. I don't really know. I'm not sensitive to that one. But the museum, what really struck me when you're talking about the Civil Rights Museum is there's a Holocaust museum. It might be even in the same building where the 6th floor museum is, where Kennedy was killed. It's around the back, I believe, of that, and it's the Holocaust Museum set up by a Dallas Holocaust survivor. And there are pillars when you go in there that are striking, and you're like, what is that? Well, once you go over and read about them, the first pillar is 1942, and each pillar, by its height, is how many millions of Jews were killed.
Wow.
Or how many millions of people in concentration camps.
Right.
And so the first one is maybe a foot high, 1.5 feet high. 1943, it's 5 feet high. 1944 and 45, it's like 11 or 12 feet high. Wow. It's just ridiculous. And you look at that, you just cannot help but be moved. And that's the first thing you see. And then it's a circular museum, so as you come out, it's also the last thing you see. And it's the same kind of thing. You get to the point where you go, I just can't take it anymore.
Right.
I just cannot take it anymore. A woman, they showed some of the things people made to survive in the concentration camps. A woman had a pair of shoes made out of human hair.
Huh. Wow. Well, we could, I think you and I both have a love of history, and we
Yeah.
could talk about our
Yeah.
museum experiences. We each probably have our favorites that we have been to. But I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about some of the things you're doing. You've got some cool stuff. You are working on starting your own podcast that goes with your marketing business. What I really want to get to, though, is you're a little nerdy, and I kind of like it. But you have a Star Wars themed event coming up. It's going to be here at Bridge Space, where we're talking right now. Tell me a little bit about this event coming up, because it's only a few weeks away, and I don't know how tickets are going to be around, if it's going to be available for people. But I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about this, because there are lots of us nerdy types out there.
Well, it's an event not just for nerdy types. It's also an event for people that love humor and love to look at gorgeous people, like myself, of course. But no, we've got professional models.
It's me, Bill.
We've
It's
got-
me, Bill. They all want to see me.
You've got tickets, don't you?
Yeah, I do.
All right, so we're going to actually have professional models there too. They're going to be part of the team. So if you like to look at gorgeous people and you like to look at people in costumes, it is a costume party, because the day before Halloween, it's a red carpet event. We'll be opening the doors from 6 to 7 for red carpet photos. You can come to the cocktail reception, champagne and cocktails. Don't need a ticket for that. That's on us. They do require to have a ticket if you want to see the filming. The filming takes place on a closed set here at Bridge Space from 7 to 10, and we're going to record 2 television shows.
Yeah, so tell us a little bit about the show itself and kind of what you're trying to do.
Well, this stems from a bipolar moment, and 2 people that have this.
We've got a theme today.
Yeah, 2 people that have this are Stephen King and J.K. Rowling. So everybody knows Stephen King's books and Harry Potter books, right? A book comes to them, and I've heard them describe this as this way. The book comes to them in a lightning strike, and all they've got to do is write it down. Now, for her, the entire Harry Potter series came to her in a lightning strike of it's almost like a divine revelation, and that's what happened to me with this. This show, I decided we need to do this show on September 15th, and here we are 45 days later filming it with professional models, makeup artists, photographers, videographers, caterers, you name it. All that's been put together, and we're ready to film. We could film it now if we could assemble everybody at the right time. But I gave away 100 tickets on the first day. There's 20 left. They're probably earmarked for family, so they may not be available at all at this point. You can go to Fanboy Toys. That's my partner in this. He has one of only 2 Star Wars only vintage and memorabilia collectible shops in the United States. So he sells nothing but Star Wars memorabilia, not toys. Fanboy Toys is a little bit of a misnomer. If you can get it in Walmart, he doesn't want it. Why would he want to compete with Walmart?
Right.
So if it's not in production anymore, it's considered vintage. And so the second of our shows is an appraisal show. If you're a true nerd, bring the stuff you had when you were a kid. He'll tell you what it's worth. The first show is more of a guest type of thing.
So is that second show is kind of like an Antiques Roadshow, but for Star Wars memorabilia.
It is. And my intellectual property attorney said I didn't want to be sued by Disney or anybody else. So I went there to say, are we free to do this? She says, Bill, it's already being done. It's Antiques Roadshow. She said Disney should love you for it. They might even advertise it.
That's awesome.
Because these are going to be on YouTube, by the way. Each one's 1 hour.
So what is then your first show? What is that going to be? Is it a panel discussion? Is it?
It's basically a talk show, yeah. But talk shows on YouTube are boring. So my job is to make it not boring. I promise if you make it or if you watch it on YouTube, and we're actually going to put the first one on there probably in the middle of November because the movie's coming out. Star Wars movie's coming out on the 20th of December.
So what are you going to be talking about in this talk show?
Well, they'll be talking about more of 3 or 4 specific items and general themes, how to spot a counterfeit, how to tell the difference between a 1978 original Millennium Falcon from a 1997 reissued Legacy series, those kinds of things. And he just goes into amazing detail. So if you're at all interested in either the show or Star Wars, I would go to Fanboy Toys. He's behind Popeyes on Highway 7, and he is a money mailer advertiser. And here's the cool thing about how this lightning strike occurred to me. He was a guest of mine in the booth at the Blue Springs Fall Fun Festival. And the very first Money Mailer podcast we did, by the way, was Bill Fickle, chairman of the Fall Fun Festival. So I got a free booth for advertising, and it's like, who's going to come over and see an advertiser, right? So I was raffling away Chiefs tickets, but still, people wouldn't come over. So I invited him ahead of time. We arranged this. And so I said, bring some figurines, bring some lightsabers. And so we were lightsaber fighting the kids at night. Looked pretty cool.
That's awesome.
And that was a lot of fun. And I was doing the voice of Darth Vader. And I was saying, young Nathan is going to challenge me. You know, and I did that whole thing to the parents while they were recording this. You know, so their child had like a 30-second lightsaber duel. And, of course, they always won. Not because I let them, because I wasn't any good. And so I watched how Sean is his name for the stage for the purposes of our show. His stage name will be Chris, and if you see the show, you'll know why. But I watched how he educated somebody specifically about a 1979 Millennium Falcon versus a 97 Legacy series, and I thought he loves to do that. You could tell he was passionate about it. He loves educating people. And he also gave up a high-paying job to do what his passion is. He was making $150,000 a year working for some auto diagnostic company, and he was a teacher, basically. Went all over the country telling people how to use this diagnostic computer equipment. So he gave it up, and he's not paid himself like me with Money Mailer. I don't pay myself. I pay myself mileage. But I watched how he educated people, and I thought, there's got to be a way to take this to millions or hundreds of millions of people. Well, it's called the WWW World Wide Web for a reason, right? And YouTube will reach them, and it's not very expensive to put it out there. I mean, I think this whole production is going to cost us each $5,000. But on the business side of things, the potential, if it takes off, is massive. And for a $5,000 ante, that's not too bad.
And it's going to be a lot of fun, right?
Oh, it's going to be a blast. It's going to be a blast. We're doing it all in one take. We're counting our airs. I've got buzzers and all these goofy sounds. And I'm going to be in costume, so I will never reveal my face on the show. I'm revealing it here.
So everybody on this podcast that's listening to the podcast today,
yeah,
they've got to swear themselves to secrecy.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Well, I don't think this is going to be seen by hundreds of millions of people like maybe our show will be. That's my hope anyway.
No.
But it is a costume
I
party.
like my numbers, but they're not that high.
So, yeah, you don't have to come in costume, but it can be real easy. So I was at my bank the other day, and I said, come. And she likes to play tennis. I said, come as a tennis player. And that's easy for you. You've already got it.
Right.
Just come as a tennis player. Come as a golfer. Put a golf club over your shoulder. Wear a little golf visor. And maybe some really loud, awful pants or something, and there you go. You're a golfer.
Well, I'm gonna. You gave me something a little bit that I think is a perfect way for us to wrap this up. You said you're gonna do this in one take.
Yes.
And you're gonna count the mistakes. You're gonna make that
Yes.
that part of the show. So that's a great kind of full circle, I think, from what we started about, where it is about owning who you are.
It is.
And making it a part of your life, and that is really cool. Bill, I want to thank you for sitting down with me. I know I asked you kind of a last minute deal yesterday to do the show, but and I said we were going to talk about your business and who you were, and we didn't. And so look, I really want to thank you for going somewhere we didn't plan, but going somewhere that was very personal, and for helping erase some stigmas and putting your story out there, because that's a big deal.
That's the bigger story here, and I'm glad we went that direction. And thank you for having me. It is the 6th leading cause of disability worldwide, people. If you don't have it, you know somebody who does. You may not know it, they may not know it, but if they've got, check out the symptoms. Just go to Wikipedia; they're correct. Just check out the symptoms and say, do they talk a lot? Do they talk fast? Do they put on weight? Do they lose weight? There's so many simple things to see. Can they never keep a relationship? Do they drink to excess? I even checked that box. I didn't drink often, but when I wasn't needing to drive or wake up early in the morning and go to work, basically it was on vacations, and I would get obnoxiously drunk and lose an entire day of a vacation nursing a hangover that I'd spent some money on, to go to Cleveland for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We were there for 2 days, and I missed an entire day at the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because I was nursing a hangover. And that's the worst, because when you get to that stage, when you're depressed and you're nursing a hangover, you self-loathe, and it's horrible. So thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it. I think this is really a bigger, more important topic than my business.
Well, I appreciate it, Bill, and we will make sure that we both push this out to as many people as we can, because we got to keep talking about it, man.
We do. Thank you for having me.
Bill, thank you, and we will talk to everybody next week. You have been listening to Lee Summit Town Hall, a Link to Lee Summit podcast with hosts Nick Parker and Jason Norberry. A proud member of the Fredcast Network, you can subscribe to this podcast on most of your favorite podcast apps and catch us every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday for all the news, analysis, and conversations on the Lee Summit community. Connect with us on Facebook at Link to Lee Summit or on Twitter at LS Town Hall.